Good afternoon. My name is Robert Friedman and I am the managing editor of Foreign Policy Digest. We would like to welcome our listeners and our viewers to another installment of Worldviews, a series of periodic interviews conducted by the staff of Foreign Policy Digest, which brings together elected officials, diplomats, and academics to a forum to discuss international relations and world affairs. Today we are very pleased to have with us Ambassador Andreas Kakouris, who is the ambassador of the Republic of Cyprus to the United States. The ambassador has served in a number of diplomatic posts within the foreign ministry, from Ireland to Brussels to the United Nations. We are very pleased to have him here with us today. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you too.
At Foreign Policy Digest, one thing we really try to focus on is to cover issues in international affairs which don't always get the coverage they deserve in the Western media. And the first question that I have for the ambassador is, I know you've served in many different diplomatic posts outside of the United States, and I was wondering whether you find the way that the U.S. media portrays the Cypriot conflict differs greatly from media portrayals in other countries. And if so, what are some of the key distinctions?
Well, firstly, thank you for allowing me to meet with you today and to give your listeners and viewers the opportunity to learn more about Cyprus, the situation in Cyprus, which, as leading into your question, is an issue which does not get the attention and space that it should, I believe, receive here in the United States as well. Look, when we talk about Cyprus, when we talk about what is known as the Cyprus problem, you have a situation where there are so many issues that are being covered by the US, where foreign policy and foreign policy issues have largely fallen off the radar screen. And when you have one issue such as our own, which is one of invasion and occupation, but which happened 35 years ago, it doesn't receive the oxygen that it should receive here in the US, because ultimately what are we talking about? We're talking about a situation where the very values and principles that this country holds dear, human rights, democracy, the rule of law, are being trodden on a daily basis through a continuation of an occupation by a country that is a close ally of the United States, called Turkey. How does the US cover Cyprus, and how does that differ from Europe or other places of coverage? I think one would see that when Cyprus is covered in the US, it is largely from the US-Turkish strategic prism. And when it's seen solely within that prism, as opposed to what it should be seen as, which is an illegal invasion and occupation, you get a somewhat jaundiced coverage of the issue. We need to go back to the basics, and that is that it's an invasion and an occupation and a violation of human rights, which doesn't get the attention it should, I believe, in US media coverage.
Great, I think that's very interesting. In your perspective, then, this kind of segues into my next question is there what misperception, perhaps, among non-Cypriots about your country or government would you like to correct or perhaps bring to light that haven't been addressed?
Misperceptions. Just going back to what I mentioned before, that there was an invasion and an occupation in 1974. The issues that the invasion and occupation brought about, refugees, the missing, the illegal expropriation of property, the enclave, the desecration of religious sites by Turkey, these don't get the coverage. And what one sees, I find, is that under the disguise of journalistic shorthand, if you don't mind me using that phrase, you get coverage indicating that on the island of Cyprus that there are two states or two peoples. There aren't. There is one state, and that's the state of Cyprus, the Republic of Cyprus, which is the only recognized state and government on the island of Cyprus. There aren't two peoples, there's one people. It's the Cypriot people, whether he or she is Greek Cypriot, Turkish Cypriot, Maronite Cypriot, Armenian Cypriot, or Latin. So those are some of the misperceptions where over time they become ingrained into a way of thinking that you have these two separate entities on the island of Cyprus. That is incorrect, and it's a misperception that needs to be clarified and cleared, that you have one country on that island, that's the Republic of Cyprus, and there are one people. One also sees, again, as I said, under the disguise of journalistic shorthand, referring to a Greek Cypriot government or a Turkish Cypriot government. Again, there is no such distinction. There is one government of the Republic of Cyprus, led by President Christofias. There is an entity in the Turkish occupied part of Cyprus which calls itself the so-called Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, which declared itself independent in 1983. The international community collectively, through the United Nations in its Security Council Resolution 541 and 550, declared that entity a secessionist entity, declared the act of secession null and void, and called on the international community as a whole not to recognise, facilitate or assist that entity. And these are issues which get lost when Cyprus is covered.
Speaking of international institutions such as the United Nations, Cyprus is a member of the European Union as well as a number of other important international institutions. How would you say that the membership in these institutions has affected your country's diplomatic and domestic agenda, and how has your country contributed to these collective international organizations?
I think that's a very important question. In some ways goes to the heart of how I see Cyprus. When you look at Cyprus joining the European Union on May 1st, 2004, which for us was, in essence, the dawning of a new age. Cyprus, a small island in the Eastern Mediterranean, what I call the European Union's lighthouse in the Eastern Mediterranean, has an important role to play. It, if I may use the analogy of a mosaic, the European Union is a mosaic of countries and cultures where human rights, democracy, the rule of law is at the epicenter. But like any mosaic, you have small pieces and big pieces, each piece being unique to the overall picture, but contributing to the overall mosaic. That is how I see Cyprus and the value added of this small island in the Eastern Mediterranean. When one talks about the EU, what are we talking about in essence? We're talking about a people, the Cypriot people, that today are not only Cypriots, but also European Union citizens. Right. So a Cypriot, whether he or she is Greek or Turkish, can today travel to, reside, study in France, Germany, or Spain as Cypriot citizens, and now as European Union citizens as well. And that is a major development in our own evolution as a country. And Cyprus has always been European. Joining the European Union was the next logical step in a relationship that we have had with what was then the EEC since 1972. And we're very proud members of the European